OPEC agrees to extend their production cut for 9 more months. Israeli forces bombed a residential area in Damascus, Syria early on Monday. And police in Hong Kong have driven out protesters who ransacked the Legislative Council building. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries has agreed to extend their current production cut until March 2020. This as an effort to control oil prices and maintain a balanced market. Since 2017, the OPEC has been reducing production levels to prevent a collapse of the oil market, just as the United States has increased its own production levels. The 176th OPEC meeting is currently underway in Vienna, Austria. It's being led by Venezuela's oil minister and president of state-owned oil company PDVSA, Manuel Quevedo, as OPEC's current president.
Everyone supported the proposition to extend for 9 months the limits agreed in December.
Meanwhile, the Iranian oil minister has said the United States is responsible for the state of the oil market, saying it has been politicized. The U.S. has flooded the market with shale oil produced by fracking, driving prices down.
The U.S. is responsible for everything that happened in the market. I believe, and we, as Iran, we have told it that the market should be depoliticized, oil market, and we should leave, U.S. should leave the market to do based on its fundamentals. If one country wants to put pressure on the market and to politicize the market, it will change many things, and it's not clear what happened in the market. Because of all this, we again repeat it that all the players in the market should try to depoliticize the oil market.
In other news, Iran has officially breached the terms of the 2015 nuclear deal by stockpiling over 300 kilograms of enriched uranium. Iran has said that talks led by European countries to save the deal last week had offered too little.
As I have been informed, Iran has crossed the 300 kilogram limit based on its plan, and we had announced this plan before. Therefore, based on what we had announced, we said very clearly what we're going to do, and we will act on it. We see it as a right based on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
4 civilians lost their lives and over 20 were injured in Syria after Israeli forces bombed areas in the south of Damascus early on Monday. We have more in this report.
Besides bombing strategic sites of the Syrian army, Israeli forces also hit residential areas in southern Damascus. Most of the injured were children. An infant was killed.
These latest attacks reached residential areas, and they have once again confirmed the cowardice of the Zionist forces. The Israeli forces are not brave enough to face off with our army, so they attack defenseless civilians.
After the early morning eruption of violence, the people of Damascus and Homs eventually went back to their daily activities. They praised the work of anti-air guns, which shut down most of the rockets fired by Israeli warplanes flying in Lebanese airspace.
Syria has sacrificed a lot in defense of our sovereignty, and as such, we remain firm. They will not make us kneel, no matter how much they attack us. After we are gone, new generations will follow our example and will defend their homeland in the face of any attacks.
Monday's onset is yet another example of Israel's attack against the Syrian army under the false excuse of attacking alleged Iranian army outposts inside Syria. Many believe these attacks are just a way to provide support for Syria's extremist forces.
Preparations have been completed to resist any new attacks by Israeli forces. Experts in Zionist matters agree Monday's attack has the makings of a preventive action to destroy strategic Syrian outposts and stop the army from retaliating with the support of Iranian forces.
These latest attacks took place mere days after defense leaders from Russia, the US and Israel met in Jerusalem and have sent a clear message to Moscow that they must not abandon their allies in the fight against terrorism in Syria.
In Lebanon, the government has expressed concern for shootings which occurred over the weekend and has assured that efforts will be undertaken to restore security in the country. Lebanon's Supreme Defense Council said it has taken decisive measures to bring those involved to justice. This after gunmen murdered 2 aides of State Minister for Refugee Affairs, Saleh al-Gharib, on Sunday. The incident escalated as supporters of Walid Jumblat, Lebanon's main Druze leader, protested against a planned visit to the area by Foreign Minister Gebran Bassil, who later cancelled.
The Supreme Defense Council took decisive measures to restore security to the area that witnessed deadly shooting, with no delays or relentlessness, and detain all those wanted and refer them to judiciary, with fast investigations under the supervision of the concerned judiciary. And this is to bury strife and safeguard the prestige of the state.
At least 16 people have been killed after a truck loaded with bombs exploded near a defense ministry compound in Afghanistan. Taliban fighters have claimed responsibility in a statement released after the blast. Gunfire was heard as Afghan security personnel exchanged fire with fighters who stormed a building near the defense ministry following the explosion. 100 people, including 35 children, were injured in the clash. The attack comes as the United States holds talks with Taliban leaders aimed at bringing an end to the 18-year war in Afghanistan.
We hope for lasting peace in the country and an end to the current conflicts. Everyone is fed up with war and wants to live a better life. Terrorists only kill Muslim people.
6 Turkish nationals who have been held hostage by forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar in Libya have been released. Turkey has been piling pressure and threatening to intervene if the detained Turks were not released. The Turkish Ministry of Defense reportedly denied claims that military personnel were among the freed hostages. Last week, Haftar's Libyan National Army said they would attack Turkish targets, including vessels in Libyan waters and businesses, over the country's support for the internationally recognized Libyan government. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, Venezuela has started to restore diplomatic relations with Germany. Join us in a few. Welcome back. Venezuela has agreed to begin normalizing diplomatic relations with Germany. In March, the Bolivarian government declared the German ambassador, Daniel Kriner, persona non grata after he went to the airport in Caracas to meet the opposition leader, Juan Guaido. President Nicolás Maduro has now authorized the ambassador's return to Venezuela to, quote, build an agenda of mutual interest on the basis of respect. The agreement to restore diplomatic dialogue channels was reached at a meeting in Berlin. The FARC party in Colombia has called on one of its leaders, Jesus Santrich, to reassert his commitments under the peace process. The FARC made its call after Santrich left his bodyguards on Sunday and disappeared. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Paula Fernandez, explains.
On Sunday, the National Protection Unit issued a communique which said that after the end of the night shift, the team that came on in the morning to provide protection for FARC leader Jesus Santrich did not find him in his room, and that he had abandoned his team of bodyguards, which was made up of members of this protection unit and a number of members of the FARC party. Later, the FARC itself published a statement which says in one of its points that the FARC invites Jesus Santrich to return to the places assigned to him by the party leadership and to reaffirm the commitments made during his years as a member of the revolutionary organization. And as a part of the peace agreements, you will remember that Jesus Sandrich had been in detention. He was then freed and took up his seat in the Colombian Congress, one of the seats reserved for the FARC, as a part of the peace agreements. There have been comments on social media suggesting that Sandrich abandoned his security detail because of the possibility of an attack against him, and that he is now in hiding to protect his life. Nothing has been heard from Sandrich himself, and the whole country is waiting for him to explain what's going on.
We thank Paola for that report. Angola's President, João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, arrived in Cuba for a two-day state visit on Sunday. He was received at Havana's José Martí Airport by Cuba's Vice Foreign Minister, Ana Yancy Rodriguez. According to the Angolan Foreign Ministry, Lourenço will hold bilateral talks with his Cuban counterpart, Miguel Díaz-Canel. The visit aims at strengthening the bilateral ties between the countries. Our correspondent, Fabiola Lopez, has more from Havana.
The Angolan President, João Lourenço, has a very busy schedule here in Havana. In the morning, he began with a visit to the Park of the African Pioneers, where he paid tribute to the founding father of Angola's independence, Agostinho Neto. He also gave a lecture at the University of Havana, where he thanked Cuba for its contribution to Angola's independence. He had a warm exchange with the students here. He said relationships between the two countries were very close and made it clear his opposition to the blockade against Cuba, which he called unfair and inhumane, and said Angola would always oppose it. In the afternoon, he is meeting with President Miguel Díaz-Canel with the full honors, and the two leaders are signing a number of cooperation agreements. President Lourenço is also due to visit the Mariel Economic and Development Zone, as well as various scientific institutions, like the Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. Relations between Angola and Cuba go back to 4 decades, of course, and there are currently 800 Cuban health workers serving in Angola and more than 1,130 Cuban teachers there. And also 8,000 Angolan students have studied here in Cuba. President Lourenço said he was confident that the visit would serve to develop these ties furthermore.
We thank Fabiola for that report. Barbados police are following up on a report of a body found floating in the waters of Saint Martin over the weekend. The unidentified body was recovered from Simpson Bay. Barbados is interested in confirming the identity of the deceased, as 2 U.S. citizens disappeared after getting on a jet ski on the island last Monday. New Jersey couple Oscar Suarez and Magdalena Deville had rented a jet ski and never returned. Meanwhile, Caribbean islands have joined the search for the 2 missing tourists. The Coast Guards of St. Lucia, Martinique, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines were making checks along their coast and around their islands over the weekend. Barbados called off its search on Sunday after it extended its efforts past 72 hours. The Dominican Republic has been commemorating the birth of Juan Bosch, the leader who confronted the dictatorships of Leonidas Trujillo and Joaquin Balaguer. Bosch also faced a U.S. invasion in 1965.
It's been 110 years since the birth of Juan Bosch, whose legacy has marked the political and literary history of the Dominican Republic.
The best way of paying tribute to this great Dominican is to try to understand his example. As he always used to say, you take...
Backed by the United States. In 1965, a group of officers and political organizations formed a movement to reinstate Bosch.
They were relatively successful. They overcame the conservatives, but then the United States invaded and crushed the movement and reinstalled Joaquin Balaguer as president. That marked a big change in outlook for Bosch. He went to Europe, studied a lot, entered more into contact with Marxist ideas, and came back with the aim of creating a national liberation movement.
Bosch set about re-establishing trade union rights through a democracy that had been lost under the dictatorship.
At first, Bosch came out of the struggle against Trujillo and tried to establish representative democracy on the U.S. model, but he found he was opposed by all the conservatives and by the United States. Then he tried a different path, creating a party and taking part in elections from 1978, but with the aim of transforming Dominican society.
Juan Bosch was not only a politician, but a writer and a thinker whose ideology was based on defending freedom and self-determination.
He was a man who was dedicated to human dignity, to justice, to honesty and morality, to respect for the rights of others. Above all, he was committed to this country and all the oppressed peoples of the world having a better life, now and in the future, and he demonstrated these values always at home.
In 1939, Bosch had founded the Dominican Revolutionary Party, or PRD, along with other exiles. But he later resigned, and in 1973 he founded the Dominican Liberation Party, or PLD. The party remains in government to this day, but has moved a long way from the ideas of Juan Bosch.
Hundreds of protesters gathered in Khartoum a day after at least 7 people died in clashes with security forces as they demanded a civilian-led government. Demonstrators blocked the main road leading to Sudan's capital and set up barricades as riot police looked on. They are reportedly angry after finding the bullet-riddled bodies of 3 young men near the river Nile early on Monday. Ethiopia's prime minister has ruled out ethnic links to the attempted coup, which happened weeks ago. While addressing Parliament, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the failed coup was rather aimed at destabilizing the country. This was his first address to legislators since the coup attempt last week, in which dozens of people, including 5 top officials, were killed. More than 250 people have been so far arrested in connection with the coup.
Unless it was meant to commit atrocities, with a rational mind, it is impossible to think about making a coup d'etat at the federal level. But once you become irrational, you will not succeed, but you don't choose where to start. Never. Otherwise, thinking about making a coup d'etat at the federal level in present-day Ethiopia is insanity. Impossible. You may create a tragedy whereby hundreds of thousands are slaughtered in a single day, but you cannot form a government.
Mauritania has confirmed the winner of its presidential elections, with Mohamed Ould Ghassouni touted the victor. The voting process concluded last week, but the opposition had disputed the results, alleging that the elections were not free and fair. The Constitutional Council rejected the challenge and confirmed that Ghassouni had won with a 52% margin. He will officially take over the presidency from Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz early in August. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hong Kong has celebrated the 22nd anniversary of its return to China amid an ongoing extradition protest. The ceremony was held in Golden Bohemia Square, where flags were raised to mark 22 years since British colonial rule in Hong Kong ended. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China was born on July 1st, 1997. And earlier in the day, demonstrators stormed Hong Kong's legislature in protest against a proposed law that would facilitate extraditions to China. Nonetheless, Hong Kong police have retaken the building and are assessing the damage caused by protesters who graffitied walls and ransacked most of the interior. China has said that progress is being made in rebuilding bilateral relations with the U.S. after a successful meeting between President Xi Jinping and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. The two presidents met on the sidelines of the G20 meeting held last week in Osaka, Japan. Washington has said that it will postpone further tariffs on Chinese goods as trade talks are set to begin again. Speaking in Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Geng Shuang said the negotiations will be held on the basis of equality and mutual respect.
President Xi Jinping and President Trump have just held a successful meeting at the G20 summit in Osaka. The most important consensus that the leaders of the two countries reached was to agree to continue to promote China-US relations on the basis of coordination, cooperation and stability. Both sides announced they will restart China-US trade talks on the basis of equality and mutual respect. These important agreements have set the direction for the next stage in the development of China-US relations.
The spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry also expressed the country's support for Sunday's meeting between the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. The meeting took place in the demilitarized zone dividing North and South Korea. So Trump reportedly told Kim that it was a great honor to step into North Korea, adding that a lot of really positive things are happening between the two nations. For his part, Kim said that by crossing the DMZ, Trump had shown a desire to open a new future for his nation. Moving on, Sri Lanka beat West Indies by 23 runs in a thrilling World Cup clash. Sri Lanka reached a total of 338 for 6 after 50 overs. Jason Holder took 2 wickets, while Sheldon Cottrell, O'Shane Thomas and Fabian Allen took 1 wicket each. And despite Nicolas Puran's valiant century, Sri Lanka was still able to clinch a hard-fought victory. Meanwhile, Barbadian U.S. pop idol Rihanna showed up at Durham to rally around the West Indies. Rihanna surprised spectators as she joined them in cheering on West Indies, win, lose, or draw. The West Indies team also shared their excitement to be playing in the presence of the singer, tweeting, "Look who came to rally with the mini maroon today. Hey, Rihanna." And over the weekend, hundreds of cities around the world dressed in rainbow colors to celebrate diversity and mark the end of LGBTQ Pride Month. The movement started in 1969 after an uprising against brutal police repression at the Stonewall Inn, a bar in New York City.
Some 150,000 marchers and an estimated 4 million spectators lined the streets of New York on Sunday to wave rainbow flags, celebrate the movement toward LGBTQ equality, and renew calls for action in the largest gay pride celebration in history. It was preceded on Sunday by a protest march by thousands of anti-corporate dissidents who rejected a uniformed police presence and commercial sponsorship while demanding LGBTQ equality. The Queer Liberation March aimed to call attention to the killing of black trans women, protest U.S. detentions of migrant children, and oppose actions by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration to curtail rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer.
I am very happy to celebrate these 50 years of the liberation. Enough is enough, not just for New York City, for over the world.
Also in Latin America, thousands took to the streets to celebrate diversity and their identities. In Caracas, Venezuela, in Quito, Ecuador, in Mexico City, Mexico, in Lima, Peru, with most of the pride parades being held on Sunday.
We live in Peru, which is a majority Catholic country, where we are currently discriminated against. And the parade is so that people realize that we are people who don't hate anyone, who only want to be accepted. That's what this is for.
North Macedonia held its first gay pride march on Saturday. In Singapore, marchers have called on the government to lift a law prohibiting gay sex. Meanwhile, in Nepal, people celebrated on the streets of Kathmandu.
We still need to fight more. We still need to talk about our human rights. We still need to talk about the lives of LGBTI people. We deserve the dignity and equality, and that's what we are here for.
It was a historic anniversary for all dissident movements around the world, reminding us that even 50 years after the Stonewall Uprising in New York, there are still many rights to fight for.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.